Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Informed Chiropractor. I'm Dr. Don MacDonald, your host. I get to get joined by my lovely wife, Brandy. She hasn't been on the podcast for a while, so we're going to have a little chat. I'm taking a break for the summer. We've had a busy last few months, so I'm taking that break off the podcast for the summer. I'll be back in September. So this is kind of like the farewell episode until we get back in the summer, because we're going to golf and relax and try to take it easy over the summer, go to the wave, have some fun, not teach as much seminars for the summer to take a break, and then we'll be back at it in the fall. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Don.
It's been a while.
Long time no talk.
Yeah.
For at least 2 seconds.
Yeah. So in the last, basically, I think we just said in the last 8 months, we've now done events in 5 different countries, and I wanted to ask you what's kind of been your experience after doing our world tour with the polyvagal work and the MacDonald Safety Corridor. What's been your highlights and what's been your insights?
No wonder we're tired. No wonder we need a break for the summer. We have our last event coming up here this weekend, but that'll be in June for people who listen to this podcast later on, and then we have a break until October is our next event. So a huge break, whatever we can do with ourselves. So we've been around the world. It's been fun. We've been taking the polyvagal message differently. I think many people are taking the polyvagal message, and specifically we're taking it to the world through the adjusting lens with the MacDonald Safety Corridor Protocol. And so this is really fun. This weekend coming up will be our level 3, and then we'll actually have people certified in the protocol. Everybody has beta tested it for us. Each time we've taught it, it's been a different event, which has been fun. So we get a lot of people coming back and refreshing. But I think we've learned lots, right? We've seen hundreds of chiropractors over the last 8 months, and you've adjusted hundreds of chiropractors. I've talked to hundreds of chiropractors and some of their teams, and I think we're really seeing that post-COVID, people's worlds did not come back the same as they were. They came back and they needed to adapt to a new world, both for themselves personally, for their children, their families, and of course, last of all, their business. So I think we just saw a lot of applied life experience under this lens that we're viewing everybody through, called polyvagal, that just makes a lot of sense to us. We just have really been seeing it in the health practitioners we work with.
Yeah, and have you had, because I know people reach out to you often on Facebook and just through email, and are you seeing some common questions that people have reached out with you after kind of learning some of the information around the polyvagal theory?
Well, I think every time I teach everybody, I always start with the fact that people are going to have a response to the information. They're going to have a personal response to the information if they haven't been exposed to polyvagal before. It seems like a lot of the building blocks that perhaps people have are now putting them together, where they may have been kind of spread out before and maybe not nicely put together. But most people will view this information for, I always say, their kids first, their spouse, family second, themselves third, and sometimes that might be themselves first, and then their business last. So I would say most people that are reaching out to me are suffering in silence. We are a healthcare world. We believe in a different world for humanity, and that makes us really unique in our philosophy, but it also makes us really isolated, where we feel like we should know better, do better, have known better. Those are kind of the common denominators when somebody is struggling, and that's just an epic lie, and it keeps people in a lot of silence and isolation, which really makes people unwell. So a lot of the folks that we see are sort of slowly bleeding out some unwellness. I would say they're not carotid artery gushing, but they know that things are just not coming around the way they wanted them to, or they're injured, hurt, their kids are struggling, their spouses are struggling, and they really feel like they have to keep it inside because people will judge them, or they will not be able to help the community. And none of that's simply true. So when we're teaching this information, it makes sense to a lot of people. And one of the healing prospects I think that we really share is that in order for you to heal, things have to make sense. And the minute they make sense, that alone, people begin their healing journey.
Yeah,
what have you noticed? This is a question podcast, because this was going to be yours on your own, and you said, "Hey, we should do it together," and I said, "Sure." let me find 2 seconds to do that. And this is today. So why don't you share what you found? Because you're actually laying your hands on hundreds of chiropractors around the world. So you get a different perspective than I get.
Yeah, like I've felt a lot of same sort of things you were talking about, like a lot of built up trauma and a lot of tension and stress in the body, and it's funny, I've had a lot of tears just through the adjustment process. A lot of chiropractors not feeling safe in their environment, in their town, in their friend group, sometimes in their family group. And one of the biggest things I think I've really noticed is how many participants of our seminars have said that they've really felt safe and been able to be actually in a state of ease throughout the whole event, which is also super helpful, because when you have a safe room with a bunch of safe chiropractors and then you get adjusted, it's like almost amplified on steroids. And so yeah, lots of well, as we always say, lots of jammed up occiputs, lots of right shoulders. I think we were in Australia, and I think like 60% of the chiropractors had a right shoulder. Again, a lot of visceral work, a lot of the MacDonald Safety Corridor, a lot of tension through the rib cage, through the viscera, a lot of turned in hips, like a lot of protected hips, a lot of protected shoulders. Basically, it's a sum total of the whole MacDonald Safety Corridor, and so it's quite interesting to see. And again, a lot of chiropractors, the number one thing they say when they come in is they wish the chiropractor that sees them came to the event so that they could get adjusted like that. And it kind of, that's how we started this in the first place, is I wanted to teach other chiropractors so I could get adjusted this way as well. And I think it's nice to see a blend between network practitioners, Thompson technician practitioners, activator, TRT, diversified, all the different techniques being able to come away from these events just with those little amplifiers that just help to kind of get that. We always say it's important to take away the cues of danger through subluxation reduction, but we also got to put in cues of safety. And so I think this is gives you an option of things you can do to get cues of safety into the nervous system to really help get that nervous system regulated kind of on steroids.
Well, and I think safety is such when I teach safety, I first have to start with the fact that you have to suspend your judgment on what you think safety is, because if you're going to understand neurological safety through this lens that we view clinically people through or personally people through, you can't have your own decision on what you think safety is, because one of the biggest feedback that we have gotten both from our Facebook group that we run as well as the events that we run is how safe it is. And that's really interesting, because that doesn't mean necessarily that the participants are in danger in other events, but safety is perceived below awareness at the brainstem level. And so there's that as we call it, that neuroception that is determining whether another human is safe or not. What I've really found interesting is how many people come up to us after and tell us they've been to lots of technique seminars and they have felt unsafe if they practice a different type of technique, or they practice a variation of a technique, or the biggie is if they were certified in some kind of technique and then they decided to vary away from that technique, they have felt like they might be judged, or they're not as good as who's teaching, or whatever that is. So that doesn't mean necessarily that the other events are bad or dangerous. It just means that if somebody doesn't feel the humans in the room or the humans that are trying to help them are in a neurologically safe position for them, they dial their learning off, which is a real travesty. So I'll put it to you, because you teach technique now. Why do you think so many people feel unsafe when it comes to other techniques, learning other techniques, going to technique seminars? What's the challenge in the profession around technique?
Well, I think I don't think they're intending to do it, but it is very judgy. Like if you followed certain techniques, they are quite, like even my first I went to a Pedibond seminar and it was very judgy. Like it was basically saying that if you did any other technique besides their technique, you weren't going to get the results. And it's funny how you have people who have a lighter technique and a heavier technique and more of an analytical technique and more of an energy-based technique. And the reason I think they've done that is the people who created the technique actually learned all the different things from the different techniques they learned in school and then created their own. And so I love this quote that says, the best you can do by copying someone is just repeating history. And so the best you can be is just a great copy of someone else. However, if you can take all the different techniques and then create your own, because that's the whole thing we talk about in the events, is that we don't want you to be a Dr. Don adjuster or the MacDonald Safety Corridor only in a protocol. We want you to take all the learnings that you've had and actually create your authentic style of adjusting. Because if this is truly the art of chiropractic, that means it's expressed differently through every single person. And so I think it's important I think people haven't had the permission to actually be their authentic self. And so they feel kind of judged because they're trying to mimic or they're trying to copy someone else perfectly. And if you try to copy someone else, you can be wrong because you're not perfect like them. However, if you create your optimal technique through your analysis and through your force application, which again, we talk about, that's different. Your analysis and your force application are different. You can't be wrong. Like, it's actually more, you become curious. You're allowed to have, we call that open loop, where you try different things and you're like, hey, I wonder if this, because you're understanding what's the end result. And that's what I really like about this, is that if we know what the end result of the physiology is supposed to feel like, then we just need to be creative in order to create that end result. So our goal is to create a state of ease in the tone and the nervous system. In polyvagal words, it's just creating neurological safety. And now all the different tools we have are just a way to get that end result rather than following the tool perfectly. Like that seems to be the biggest thing, is that if I don't follow the tool perfectly, then I'm a bad chiropractor, or I didn't do it right. Rather than learning the different tools. Again, we have to learn that way. Like we say before, it's like creating muffins. When we're in chiropractic school, we need to learn to follow the rules so that we learn that skill under our belt. However, like we talk about this all the time in our seminars, if you're in MasterChef, the MasterChef always had to follow the rules, follow the ingredients until they didn't anymore. And then now they go on MasterChef and they just give them a whole bunch of different ingredients, say, make something amazing with this. And so that's kind of, I think, my goal. I think that's why we attract chiropractors later in practice, probably between 5 and 30 years in practice. Like, a lot of the chiropractors that come to our events have already been in practice for quite a long time. So they've done a lot of the basic stuff. Now it's more of just almost finding yourself amongst all the technique stuff so that you can create an authentic version of yourself.
Well, one of the things that we teach a lot of is a rigid nervous system is an inflexible nervous system, which is a relationally unstable nervous system, which struggles with health and vitality. And what we find is the more left brain rigid thinking a chiropractor is, two things happen at the seminar. Either they are just so gobsmacked they can't wrap their brain around any other way because they are tied to the process of the technique. And what we're trying to move people towards, and I think why your tagline that you came up with, bringing the feeling back to chiropractic, was that, if you think back, no matter what technique somebody practices today, or blend of techniques, you all learn with your hands. Every single chiropractor started learning first a feeling, and they evolved from that. And some of them stopped feeling completely, and stuck only to indicators. Some continued the feeling, some lost the feeling, some mix up the feeling. And so when we're teaching an outcome-based protocol, which is you need to know what safety feels like in the tissue, what happens when tone changes, because we know when we change tone, we change the hierarchy of the nervous system. So that outcome is we've really watched people struggle with just an outcome-based protocol versus a process-based, because very often people say to you, well, I do it this way. Is that okay? Which speaks to, like you're saying, that judgment of technique, and what do you always say? You're like, I don't care how you do it.
I'm like, let's do a check after and see what it feels like. Did you go
and check? Does it feel different? Does it feel like you made some movement there in the tissue? Does it feel like the tissue stopped protecting that area? You tell me. How you got there, we're not as interested. So when you take a culinary student, and give them all of the recipe that they have to follow, it matters whether they have sugar or flour or salt. That matters. you need to be marking them on, they had a half a cup of sugar, they had a teaspoon of salt. So the younger you are in practice, and chiropractic students, you must do that. However, for most of our people, they've done that enough times. They actually can eyeball a cup of sugar. They can eyeball a tablespoon of salt. They don't need the recipe anymore. We care about the outcome now. And the outcome is a Michelin star dinner. Here's the stuff. You make a Michelin star dinner. We don't care how you do it. And we don't care what your technique is, what your cooking philosophy is. And so I think that's really been the evolution that sets us apart. As I watch chiropractors learn, both from you, but also the questions that we get, is that it's very unusual to have such an outcome-based orientation, because we already know what you're doing is perfect. It's already working. Every technique works. We're just redefining working, and we're bringing that feeling back and just changing the verbiage a little bit.
And I think the other thing that's kind of nice about this is because we will go over different force applications, because you can do it multiple ways. The great thing about this is the reason I think some chiropractors have a challenge going to a totally new technique seminar is that usually you'd have to go through like 3 full weekends or something like that to get certified in it. And it's doing something kind of completely different to what you've currently been doing. And the nice thing about this is you keep what you're doing. And this is how I've kind of developed my technique over the years, is that through a seminar, or when you're doing the seminar after the seminar, or we're hanging out with chiropractors by a pool somewhere where it's fun, that's where you actually learn little tools that just kind of fit into your toolbox. And so I think that's the nice thing too, is that you can pick up like 2 or 3 things that you can just implement into your toolbox without having to learn like a full new analysis or a full different force application. If you're going from, like, say, instrument adjusting to Thompson to Gonstead to network, like they're all kind of a different protocol. And it's nice to have something that you can kind of blend into all of those.
The other thing we really noticed, other than just the safety aspect of the events, is how many female docs are attracted to this information, not only in our Informed Chiropractor group, but who comes to the events. And 75% of our attendees are females. And I find that really, really interesting, because almost half the profession today is female. I'm always laughing still. I'm sort of over the whole girl power thing, but it is pretty funny to see sometimes some of the big mega seminars still have like 2 token women and a bunch of the, eat the beating live heart from a deer men that don't really appeal to lots of people, not just females, but females do have a unique experience, I think, and they're more drawn to this because why?
Well, I
asked
personally,
a male chiropractor.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, you're the one teaching, so I'm curious what your perspective is.
Well, I think too, just in general, I think that women have a tendency to be a little bit more attracted to like either polyvagal work or safety, because I think it's, again, and this is me just talking about what I think women think about, which probably isn't coming from the right person, but I just think they're more open to that. And I think a lot of men, a lot of, especially now, like it's all like if you're trying to get into this male power, you're almost trying to be like the alpha man. And in the alpha man, it's not quite as much of the feeling safety stuff. Like it feels like you got to man up sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the men that we do attract to the seminars are also are like, there's still some alphas, but there's a lot of them are amiables. And I think in the profession, a lot of male chiropractors are more amiable. So they don't have that driver, personality that's just kind of like primary in their soul. And so for example, for me, like in the old days, if they said, just tell people what to do and then they'll do it, or just tell them what they need to say and then they'll do it, or just tell them this script and then that'll be good for your report findings. And as an amiable personality, I find like I need to understand it like better than that. I can't just say something that I don't fully understand because I'm not going to feel comfortable doing it. And so I think by understanding, like, again, that's why I think the polyvagal theory is so brilliant. As I always said, chiropractic had the big idea. We just had no idea why it worked. I think we're the only healthcare profession in the world where it worked from the very beginning. And then we spent the next 100 and some years trying to figure out through science why it worked. Like we're just trying to come up with our story. And a few of the stories we had in the past weren't accurate. And then that kind of punched holes in some of our arguments when we're trying to say what chiropractic is and why it works. And so I think understanding not only the feeling and the safety aspect of it, but also on getting certainty with understanding the new science through the polyvagal theory, I think that just helps. Like if I'm more confident and I know what's going on, it just helps me as an amiable personality to be a lot more certain when I'm in practice.
It's funny, I think that for a lot of the females that do come or follow the information, I think polyvagal, because its roots are and were and will probably continue to be in psychology, psychiatry, social work. There's a heavy percentage of females, obviously, and I'm a past social worker. The only males that I even remember were the guys at the top, like the executive directors, the board chairs, the guys in the government. Most of us on the ground were women. And I think that's partially it. I think because it has its roots in trauma, that immediately turns off a huge percentage of people believing that polyvagal is about trauma. And it is absolutely not about trauma. It is the science of being safe. It is the science of the nervous system. I call it the human algorithm. And it is understanding the code that is written within all of us through evolution in this hierarchy and how we identify safety and threat. And that changes our autonomic state. And that leads to poor health outcomes, period. And so from a health practitioner's perspective, I think, like you said, if we don't understand what polyvagal is, it appears to be much more airy-fairy than what it actually is, which is pretty hardcore and pretty in-depth. And if you read any of Stephen's stuff, you can really see how in-depth it actually is. And the thing I love about it is that he calls it a theory for a reason. It's not done. He said he only came up with it for questions for research. That's the only reason it exists, and it's still being researched. So every year that goes by, he's learning new things. And so the polyvagal theory is not something that's set in stone. So I think if you don't understand it, or it appears to be something that is, I don't deal with those people in practice. Well, if you deal with humans, you deal in polyvagal. You just don't know it. If you deal in athletes, you deal in polyvagal. If you deal in car accidents, you deal in polyvagal. If you deal with babies and children, you deal with polyvagal. You deal with the algorithm of the nervous system. That's what we do as chiropractors, whether you're aware of it or not. And I think it's been really interesting to watch that evolution. You're a 6'4", 200 and whatever, 20-pound dude that is full of female chiropractors, lots who have baby practices and prenatal practices, some who just do pure network, some who do BGI, some who do full spine manual. It's just such a cool thing to observe. A lot of these people come together, and also the men that come to go away from that and just realize, oh, that was not actually what I thought it was at all. I'm so much more equipped to practice the way you already practice. Like, it's not changing how you practice, it's equipping you better to practice more awarely, more acutely, and also to take care of yourself. So that's what I love about it. And I think that's probably why we see more females right now than males in our seminar. And we're fine with that. It's just a very interesting phenomenon to watch from a male leadership in the profession.
Well, it's funny. I remember one of the seminars that we were at, a female chiropractor who'd been in practice for like 30 years came up to me at the break and said, "This is hilarious." She said, I had light bulbs going off left and right, not so much going like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this, but linking why she did it, because a lot of times chiropractors are innately doing a lot of these things. But the funny thing she said is that she could never, like, she had a hard time like with her associates, like teaching others. So a lot of times if you're in practice for a while and you have associates and you're trying to train the associates or help mentor younger associates, often it's hard to just explain it, because you just say, I just do it, like, just do what I do. Like, but it's just innate. But the nice thing about the polyvagal theory is it gives us language to be able to explain things so that it actually makes more sense. So not only is it, like we always say, the best way to get better at something is teach it to someone else, which that's why I feel it's actually magnified my technique massively, I think, over the last like couple of years, just having to be able to teach this, because now I'm not only just doing it innately, but I'm also trying to write it down and being able to explain to other people. And then when they don't understand it, we're able to tweak it. And that's why every single time we do a level 1, level 2, level 3, it's actually improved every single time, because we've always taken feedback and we're just amplifying it dependent on the feedback that comes back. But she just said, this is amazing because now I know why I do what I do. And so when you know why you do what you do and you can explain it to other people, you actually become massively more powerful, because now you're intentful and you know why you're doing it. And then, just there's no distractors. You're just on it.
I mean, we'd love to all be an energetic practice where just innately people, we don't need to talk to people, it just flows through us. And, there's a very small percentage of the world like that, but that is not us. And that is not most of the people we work with. We still need to be able to make sense of it for people. And if you don't have the ability, you innately know, but you cannot bring that to a conscious awareness to make it make sense to somebody. I'm always looking at how it lands on the public and how it lands on people who are not chiropractors. And that, like, we fail in that area. We fail whether we're in this umbrella or not under this umbrella. We just fail in that area because it makes so much sense to us, but we only innately make it make sense, which means we don't have a conscious awareness to bring it into a language that makes it make sense for other people. And that's where we've really failed in chiropractic, I believe, is just we can't make it make sense to the public on a grand scale. And so that's really hard for us. And so I think when people can get some language and make it make sense and tweak the language, and also then, of course, like be more intent focused on how important it is in practice for you to be able to feel people's physiology. That I think is what we're seeing with a lot of the docs that leave, that's really all they're doing differently, and it's massive.
Just a question for you is because people always ask you, do you actually say that to practice members? Because you do most of the intakes, for the initial exam, like the case history to kind of get things started. Like how have you found the principles from the polyvagal theory land on practice members when they come in?
Well, yeah, people ask me, do you actually say that? Yeah, I do. Again, we call ourselves lived experience mentors. I don't teach anything I do not live. I haven't lived, I haven't experienced. I'm not your girl if you're looking for a nice book on something that somebody else taught me. I only teach what I experience, and I teach what I'm successful experiencing, and also what hasn't worked out so well. So with the principles of polyvagal, they're so simply put. People are coming to our office because everything else they've heard usually doesn't make sense to them. That's the thing that you have to appreciate. Very rarely are we having somebody come into our office and they all understand everything we do and it's aligned with what they believe. That's just not who we see. We see the general public who have either been everywhere and they've either failed them or it has not made sense to them. They've been to other chiropractors that has been an epic failure for the patient. And the biggest thing is, other than them maybe not healing the way they want to, they often will say, like, that just doesn't make sense to me. What they're saying is it doesn't land on me. Like, I'm not understanding it. So it's funny because they don't need to necessarily executive function understand it as much as they need to have it make sense to them in like a grade 1 level. So I think people think it needs to be more complex than it needs to be. It's very simple. And really, when the nervous system is under threat, it launches a whole bunch of responses to keep us in a state of defense, period. And I can link that to anything anybody has at any time and how we need to bring them out of that for the period of time we have them in the office. And that's it. That's polyvagal. Yes, have I been able to simplify it because I'm immersed in it all the time? Of course. But once you understand it, it doesn't have to be more complicated, I think, than what we think it is. The other thing that I really appreciate, some of the feedback we've gotten now on multiple events, is that many people have come to us to have taken lots of polyvagal stuff, read all the books, done all the programs, done stuff outside chiropractic. The thing missing, though, is we are just chiropractic. We are not teaching exercises. We are not teaching breathing. We're not regulation coaches. We do this through the chiropractic adjustment. We have always been and we will always be a chiropractor first. The chiropractic adjustment is enough. I have said that for my 20 plus years of being on this journey. Everything else is an added bonus, and we never vary off the chiropractic adjustment to make a neurological change, period. So that is what I do think sets us apart. And because of that, a lot of the language I use with our people is going to vary from other folks that they have seen, because we're not going to be doing a bunch of other stuff. Our focus is chiropractic, and it is the chiropractic adjustment, and then making it make sense to people why they're experiencing what they're experiencing at the time they're experiencing it.
And I think this has just been an amplification on what we did in the past too, because we were just doing a call yesterday with our Informed Chiropractor group, and you're talking about the vitality shift, because we started off with the vitality shift before we took a big dive into the polyvagal theory. And maybe you can just kind of explain how, like, all of that stuff, we just have kind of tweaked up our language, but it's all built on the same principle. Like,
yeah, like the Vitality, our flagship program, a lot of people think that we practice differently now. The core of our practice is still how we practice in the shift. The vitality shift and our neuro testing and the way in which we communicate and the way in which we find out what's important to people, none of that changed. What we do is we use our objective findings the same, we perform the same tests, we do the same reevaluations, but the way in which we view that information, see, polyvagal is it's a lens and a pair of glasses that you wear. It is not changing your day-to-day routine, because you can actually keep your same routine short of adjusting, where I think there's protocols added that you have added in and things you've taken away. But as far as the overall clinic experience, we have really just elevated our ability to do what we're doing, but do it better, do it more specifically, and make it make way more sense to far more people. And post-COVID, we had to do that because what we were observing, just that model alone wasn't enough. It was making us stuck in some cases. So we needed to just take those glasses off and put these ones on. Or it's almost like wearing like trifocals. So we have a trifocal lens, and that lens that we wear, of course, is the vitality shift, is a way in which we neurologically measure function. It's a way in which we connect with individual people. It's a way in which we move people towards care planning and on a care plan. That's one of our focals. The other focal is obviously chiropractic philosophy, our belief system about the human body, or the salutogenic lens, we call it. And the third is the polyvagal lens. So we're actually wearing these trifocal glasses when we go into clinic, and we're just going like up and down all day with these glasses, depending on what we need with who we're working with. But all three of them live in the same lens of the clinical glasses we put on every day.
And it's funny because I think that's why I like the like how this is added to things, is because the polyvagal theory is this concept which is universal across everything. So it's between humans, it's like all relationships, it blends into everything that we've done so perfectly. And that's why I like how you kind of said the three lenses, because it's true. Like you're just getting these skills. And I think the one thing that's been consistent is we've always wanted to kind of almost tailor our care to each individual person, and try to stay away from like this, like the scripts and everything's exactly the same, and really try to make it unique. Just like we're having conversations with different people, you don't say the same thing to every single person that you talk to. You want to have that two-way communication, and in order to do that, you have to have all these skills that once you're clunky at first, because it's a little bit hard work. So we have some chiropractors that have to write down some notes or concepts they want to write down until they get better at it. But like once you get better at it, like you said, you can be in any situation at any time and link anything to chiropractic and neuroregulation in about 2 seconds.
When you see all the chiropractors, and so many of them come to our events that really are struggling with their health stuff, and I joke around, people are like, is that how long it takes? I'm like, if we saw chiropractors, we'd see like 7 people a day. That's my joke at these events. Because no, it doesn't take that long. But number one, you don't know them. And number two, eventually when you get really ninja at identifying like priorities in the protocol, like, you're not doing all the things all the time with everybody. And so like our assessment and analysis is the same, with the exception of identifying different priorities under polyvagal. And same with the communication. Yes, everybody gets scans, or yes, all adults might get x-rays, or yes, everybody does our chiropractic vital signs, but how we explain them and clinically what that information tells us today is different than it was 5 years ago. So that, I think, is where it changes, is in the individual application of the information that everybody still gets on an assessment or an analysis.
And I think that's super powerful. And it's, and again, even just like actually listening to people, why they came to the event, especially just in Australia. And so many of them came from the Vitality Shift. And it's so funny because like a lot of the Vitality Shift has changed their confidence. And even my interview we did back with Aileen, she talks because she does this a really light technique, SOT and stuff. And people would always say to her, does that even do anything to your body? And she's like, well, I'll show you 2000 before and after objective testing. And so like it just totally increases your certainty as well, right? So I think those are all awesome. So honey, what are we doing for the summer and what's coming up for the fall?
Well, summer, do you think people care? No, people don't care what we're doing summer.
Well,
But
we're
in
going
the
to the
fall,
wave. We're going to the wave if anybody wants
go
to
to the
come.
wave,
Yeah.
yes. Excited to see some of the students that we took through a modified level 1 with when we were there in January for the student event that we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so summer really we dial back quite a bit. September we will be in Calgary for CPN&x annual event.
Yeah.
That's exciting for me because I have not been back since I started that organization with Dr. Craig Hazel. So I'm excited to go back to Calgary. Apparently I'm the only Canadian so far on the docket. So all the Canucks, come on out. This is
She's pretty good if you want to hear her
your
speak.
organization. October, we are in Montreal. We're
October
doing
26th.
level 3 in Montreal. So level 3 is a little bit interested. We're hybriding a little bit. So people don't necessarily have to have come to 1 or 2. They could have come to a combination of our emergence 1 or 2. It's just you have to have some basics before you come to level 3.
Or be in the Informed Chiropractor.
Or be in our Informed Chiropractor group. Yeah. And in November, we are in Windsor, England for level 2. We're changing it up this year. A few people have reached out about Europe. We are going to start letting people come to level 2 if they haven't done our level 1, but there will be either you will have to do a precursor little program beforehand on polyvagal that we have, or be part of our Informed Chiropractor group where you can catch up and then come to our level 2. So that's going to be in Windsor. I'm really looking forward to that one. We're
November 16th.
In the last, what would you call the queen that died? The what do you call it when somebody dies?
They passed away.
The past queen.
The past
resident.
Queen.
Yeah. Last time I was in Windsor, the queen was living there, so the flag was raised, and so I'm excited to go back there. And then December is going to be really fun because that is going to be our Informed Chiropractor polyvagal shift super conference. So that's going to be a multi-speaker day and a breakout for probably prenatal, pediatric kind of polyvagal stuff, as well as the CA breakout. So that's going to be in Toronto, Ontario. That one will probably sell out. So as soon as we get that stuff up, people should start registering for that one, because that one is going to have limited space for the fact that teams are going to be coming to that, as well as multiple speakers. So that one's going to be fun. So that's the rest of the year in a nutshell. And
we got Dr. Peter Kevorkian's coming for that one too. So he'll be in Toronto. So we'll look forward to that.
So let me ask you, as we end, you wanted to do what you called a love letter to the profession after this year of teaching. So you should have the final word with the final, it's like Bridgerton when they have all these really beautiful love letters, and this is your favorite thing ever is to be put on spot and come up with like a love letter to the profession, but you don't have to read a love letter. You just have to like pretend like you're closing out a love letter.
Yeah. You know what? It kind of just breaks my heart a little bit just as we travel around, how many chiropractors are just quietly suffering. Like it's just, it is kind of crazy. And just in general, just realizing how much judginess has been in the profession. And I think I probably really needed that actually at the very beginning to get it going, because if you have a brand new idea and you're trying to get it out there, you're going to be going against a lot of opposition. So you basically will be judgy and you be pretty pushy and things are right and this is wrong. And the challenge with it now is it's so throughout the profession, people are just quietly like, this is the amiable people, because the big driver people that are really vocal about it, you can tell because they either are or they aren't. But the amiable chiropractors out there are feeling it inside. They're not even saying anything, but they go to events and they feel anxious. It's not even a technique seminar, it's just a chiropractic seminar. And the whole goal we talk about in polyvagal is co-regulation, and co-regulation is need to hang around with our people. We need to be with our tribe. And what a shame that if they go to a tribal event and they feel anxious, and they don't really want to connect. And we've had chiropractors come up and say, like, because we always do a social in the evening because we want to hang out and do the seminar after the seminar. We always want to be connecting with everybody that comes. And so many chiropractors said normally after an event, they just go to their room because they just feel like almost feel shame, or they feel anxious, or they don't want anyone to ask them how they're doing in practice because they don't want to just make stuff up. And I think, just having that safe environment for people to open up really has been able to see how many chiropractors are suffering out there. And I think we are so important to the human race. And I know people say it all the time. But like it really is. And the work that we do is so vitally important. Like I say all the time, we are sometimes the only co-regulator our people have in their whole life. And so we're always giving that away in practice. And so we need a place where we can get it back. And so I really appreciate all the chiropractors who shared that information with me when we've been sitting out having a beer after or something, just saying like I had one chiropractor in Australia, she said, holy cow, I did not feel anxious because in Australia, we did 2 days back to back. She said the whole time, I just felt like I was at home with my tribe and just felt at ease. And so I wish that for everybody out in the profession.
Nice. Well done. So you did good put on the spot.
All right. Well, and Leslie, have you leave with some words of inspiration too, since you like putting people on the spot? We'll put the spot back to you.
Well, I just think watching over the last year, you teach technique to so many chiropractors or teach the protocol has been really fun. I've shared this lots in our events, but many people listen to this podcast haven't been. Lots of people know who I am in the profession. If you've been out for more than like 8 years, lots of you, we taught as students. We're now getting up into nobody understands long in the tooth, which is shocking to me, but we're long in the tooth, which means we're old. And there's just a moment in time where I was at the end of my capacity to make a difference in the profession without somebody else helping me do that. And the rubber hits the road in technique. People do not pay, no matter how amazing I am or your CAs are, they don't come and pay to see me. Because if the chiropractor does not show up, there's no business. So it has been nice to break the barrier past what my capacity has been to make a change. And it really has been through the hands of all the chiropractors that have come and listened to you and will continue to come through our Informed Chiropractor group that has basically been with us the entire time. The retention is insane in our group. People come and rarely leave. And that just speaks to, I think, the difference that everybody else wants to make at that level as well. Because I think that, the rubber hits the road when your hands hit somebody's body. Not literally, but not literally, but figuratively. And that's where I think the biggest difference is going to be made. Yes, we want people to understand it. Yes, we can teach how to communicate it. Yes, we can teach the theory behind it. But it really matters when you put on those trifocal lenses and then lay your hands on somebody. It's golden, it's rocket fuel. So that, to me, that has been the biggest benefit and really thrill over the last year, is to watch people really learn from you and then just change or adapt a few things they're doing in their practice, which just makes them a little more impactful to people that they take care of.
And for any of you out there listening, if you're interested in joining the Informed Chiropractor, it's a monthly group mentorship program. It's on a wait list right now because when we add people in, we add them in cohorts because there's a lot of catching up to do because we have chiropractors have been in there. We've been having conversations for 6-7 years, and we want anyone who joins our tribe to be able to get kind of a nice onboarding so they can kind of get an introduction to what we're talking about and how things work. So if you go to theinformedchiropractor.com, on the homepage, there's a sign up where you can put your name on the waiting list for the next time we open it up. So thanks, honey, for making it back on the podcast.
Thanks, honey, for harassing me for the last year to do so.
Yes, thank you very much. And for all my listeners out there, you guys, if you're down in Australia, obviously it's not your summer, but for anybody who's in the northern hemisphere, I hope everybody has an amazing summer holidays. I'll be back with the podcast in September. Hopefully we see at the WAVE or at the CNAC conference in Calgary. But until next time, have a wonderful summer.